Hello and welcome to the latest ADS and AMDS webinar in the Data and COVID-19 series. We're very excited to have you here to listen to talks from Dennis Huisman and Menno de Bruyn from NS about capacity modeling in public transport. And there's been a very exciting transition into finishing the intelligent lockdown yesterday. So you'll hear what NS have had to do in the last 3 months and what they plan to do in the coming months. And I should also mention that this webinar series comes as a collaboration from Google, Elsevier, Amsterdam Medical Data Science, and Amsterdam Data Science. And we're very excited for this collaboration. And we have 2 more webinars lined up in the coming weeks. So do check out our meetup page if you're interested in looking at any of the upcoming webinars. And now I shall pass you over to Mark Salomon to introduce AMDS.
Good afternoon and welcome to this seminar. We are very honored to have Dennis Huisman and Menno de Bruyn from Dutch Railways as speakers today. In the whole series around COVID-19, we thought it would also be very interesting to say a few words about public transport and how planning in public transport is taking place. And Dennis and Menno are willing to do so on behalf of the Dutch Railways. We are organizing this seminar series as Amsterdam Data Science. Amsterdam Data Science is a cooperation between the universities in Amsterdam, so the Vrije Universiteit, the University of Amsterdam, the HVA, the University of Applied Sciences, and the Center of Mathematics and Computer Science in Amsterdam. And Amsterdam Medical Data Science is a cooperation between the hospitals in Amsterdam and the people that are doing data science within these hospitals. Now, I would like to give the floor to the speakers from Dutch Railways, and they will start now, Menno and Dennis, with their talk.
So my name is Dennis Huisman, working both at NS and at Erasmus University. I will do the first part of this talk, where I will look back at the last 3.5 months. Of course, yesterday was the end of the intelligent lockdown, but I will look back to the months March to June, what happened and how we adjusted our train services. And then in the second part, Menno will talk about the coming periods. So what will be the long-term effects on passenger demand and what do we expect for the coming years? So I will start now and talk about our design process of the different timetables that we had into operation for the last 3.5 months. And I will do it a little bit as it happened. So I will go back to March, and then we'll come back at the end to the 1st of July, the end of the intelligent lockdown. So I will start with the challenge that we faced on March 14 this year. Actually, that was on a Saturday, and you see here on the picture on the right that there was a small team of people from NS together to face this challenge. But let's first go back what was that day. A few days before, on March 12, Prime Minister Rutte had one of his first press conferences in a row, where he announced that all the employees should work at home as much as possible. Of course, that's not for everyone possible, but for most people it is. And also that higher education, such as universities, had to switch to online lectures from March 13 on. Moreover, of course, we knew that other things happened in other countries. So we were aware of the situation in Italy, where this kind of steps were taken, let's say, a week earlier. So we didn't know what would happen in the coming days, but it was clear that more was expected. And of course, for NS, there was an enormous uncertainty because, of course, a train cannot drive without a train driver. And of course, what we saw is that the illness percentage initially in Brabant, but later on also in other parts of the country, started to increase. And of course, we were not aware to which level this would go at that moment. So basically, we came together with a small team, and the challenge was basically to design a completely new timetable that would be still possible to operate under all circumstances. And the idea was, of course, because we are crucial to bring crucial employees to their work. For instance, think about nurses to the hospital or supermarket employees to the supermarket, such that these vital sectors could still be open and the society could be working in some ways, at least in these crucial areas. So that's the challenge that we faced. And of course, there was an enormous uncertainty. So what was actually going to happen, we didn't know. And of course, our regular methods where we first made predictions on the future. So for instance, how many passengers will we have? How many resources like train drivers and guards will we have? Yeah, we didn't have precise predictions anymore. So we had to do it in another way. So we choose for a kind of scenario approach where we had, for instance, for the availability of train drivers, we expected two scenarios. One, the first scenario which we took into account was that there would be 40% less drivers available in the coming weeks. And the second one, but also that it would be that we could spread them over the country, so 40% in total on the national level, but that we could also have some spreading effect. And the second scenario was even worse, where it was 50% less drivers, but also more, basically a reduction at all bases, at all our bases. Of course, what we wanted to achieve is not what we normally want with the timetable, that we have an attractive timetable and that we get as many passengers as possible travel by train. But in this case, it was not the goal to have as many passengers. It was mainly the goal to have enough capacity for commuters that couldn't work at home. So think again about the nurses. And it's important to know that most commuters travel only a short distance by train, so usually less than 30 kilometers. And we had some additional information on this Saturday because the day before, after the first announcement of the Prime Minister, already passenger figures dropped by 85%. So that was quite a lot. So we knew that let's say that probably it will be even more, but at least this gives you already kind of indication. There were also some other additional requirements for the timetable. First of all, it had to be easy to implement and to operate, but also easy to construct, because we wanted to have it in operation in a few days, because already at that moment, the number of drivers, the illness percentages were increasing a lot. So we wanted to be ready as quickly as possible. So that also meant that it should be not too difficult to introduce. And also, of course, because we didn't know what was going to happen, it should be easy to further downgrade the timetable if the situation got worse, or if the situation improved, to upgrade it. And ultimately to go back to the normal situation, the normal time. And basically we translated this requirement for the commuters, basically also that we said we need to have a kind of minimum service level for our commuters. And we thought, let's say, now, ideally we would like to have 2 trains per hour per direction. But if necessary, we could even go to 1 train per hour. Finally, we also thought for, of course, by traveling by train, you also can spread the virus. If you are infected, you can infect other people, and in that way they can affect others, etc., etc. So of course the government stimulated that you wouldn't travel that much, but we could do that also a little bit with the timetable. So especially leisure travelers should be stimulated to not use the train. And these are most often long distance travelers. So we took that into account when constructing the timetable, that it should be especially attractive for the short-term travelers and not that much attractive for the long distance travelers. So that's what we incorporated. And then basically we came up with, we made two different scenarios, two timetables. And on that Saturday, we computed all kinds of statistics to see if we met the requirements. So the first one, timetable number 1 in this table, had a minimum service level of 2 trains per hour, and basically consisted of mainly sprinter trains, which are the trains that stop at every station. And the number of intercity trains was drastically reduced, basically to almost nothing, only in the parts of the country where there are no sprinter services available normally, then we would run intercity trains, but that should also stop on all the at all stations. And in that timetable, basically we needed indeed 40% less train drivers, but unevenly spread over the different bases of the country, especially in the large bases in the Randstad. We had a larger reduction, but in the periphery of the country, so in Limburg and in Zeeland, the reduction was much less than 40%. But basically that means that if we would choose this, then also maybe if the illness rate goes up there, then drivers from other bases had to move there such that they could go to stay there and maybe go in a hotel or whatever. That was the first timetable. And also, of course, we looked at how much capacity will this offer. By the way, at that moment, we didn't know the 1.5 meter rule. So we just computed it in the regular way. And then we figured out that we could operate this timetable easily with, if the reduction of passengers was 50% or more. Which with this 85 would easily be possible. We also constructed an even worse timetable with only a minimum service level of 1 train per hour in some parts of the country, two trains in the Randstad, but 1 train outside the Randstad. And then, of course, we needed less drivers. Actually, the total number was not much less because it went from 40 to 45% less, but it was much better divided over the country, such that also the bases in Limburg and in Zeeland, etc., there was a need for less drivers. And with that, we would have enough capacity with even 75%, with 75% less passengers or more. In addition, we wanted, of course, that these timetables were possible to upgrade or downgrade to each other. So they were constructed in such a way that that was possible. And then basically, a lot of things happened between that Saturday and the Saturday next week where it went into operation. First of all, the board decision was on a Monday morning, March 16. And they got a lot of additional information because on Sunday evening, if you remembered, all the restaurants and cafes were closed. And also it was decided that the schools would be closed from Monday on. So that makes it also easier to choose for such a dramatic step that we did. So, and actually we choose to first go for timetable 1. And now from hindsight, we know that we never went, fortunately, never had to downgrade to number 2. So the timetable itself went into operation on Saturday, March 21. So we had 5 days to construct this, to basically put this timetable in the systems and also reschedule all the rolling stock and crew. And the good thing is that basically we constructed it in such a way that because we operated mainly the sprinter trains, the rolling stock rescheduling was very easy because the twin trains just run as normal, more or less, and the intercity trains were almost all cancelled. So that was relatively easy to do. you don't need any advanced method or algorithm for that. You can do that very easily. But for crew, it was much more complex and of course much more crucial to reschedule that. Because normally the crew travels throughout the country from one place to the other. And of course, if you run only sprinter trains, and there's sometimes when the sprinter trains, sometimes intercity trains, that's not, you really need to adjust the duties completely. So for the train drivers, we adjusted all the duties, and basically we used there an algorithm that we use also for other situations. And with this algorithm, we could reschedule the duties, let's say in let's say a couple of hours computation time on the fast PC. And this algorithm makes use of techniques like column generation, Lagrange relaxation, and all kinds of fixing heuristics. So for people who are familiar with that, I will not go into the details, but there are publications about it if you're interested. For the guards, we even had to do a little bit more because we also changed the rules. Normally on short trains you have one guard, and on longer trains you have two guards, and also a little bit the time of the day you also have, for instance, late at night, two guards on the trains. But of course, when there are guards on the trains, they have much more risk than the driver to get infected, because the guard sees also passengers. So we wanted to reduce that effect, so we changed the rules that only on all trains only one guard was needed for this period. And of course we had to adjust these rules in our algorithms and to recalculate the complete schedule. By the way, with the same techniques as I mentioned before. And of course, when there was only one guard, also the guard itself has a lower risk. He or she will not be affected or has a smaller risk, and of course then will also not affect others. So that was a reason to do that. So that timetable went into operation on March 21. Of course, it is not the best timetable ever because we constructed it just in a few days, where we normally take about a year. In the days after and the period up to this week, we made several improvements to this timetable, to what we called the basic timetable. In the meantime, and also, of course, we made a plan afterwards at the end of March, at the beginning of April, how we would upgrade again to the normal timetable. So, to have a little bit about the information, and of course from hindsight it's easy to know what happened when. So basically this basic timetable had mostly sprinter trains, so which roughly means that about half of the trains were operated, with a capacity, when we had this 1.5 meter rule at some point, of 25% of the seats. Then we decided, because all the intercity trains were basically parked on a big parking areas around the stations, they couldn't be reintroduced immediately, but it has to be done in steps. On the other hand, also the illness percentage, of course, would at some point improve again, but also in small steps. So that's where we already took the decision in the beginning of April that we would return to normal in 3 major steps. And perhaps there would be some sub-steps, but at least 3 major steps. Of course, we didn't know the dates at that moment, because that was very dependent on the government decisions that would be taken. And the first improvement was made, the big one, the first upgrade was on April 29. Not by accident, that was a date that was already known a long time before. It was known that the government would make a decision for that period, although everybody was very disappointed at that time that they took a decision that we would be still in lockdown for a few more weeks. But we upgraded the timetable and reintroduced some of the intercity trains. I will come back on that on the next slide. But roughly we went to 75% of our train services, but in the capacity it had a big effect because intercity trains have much more seats than sprinter trains. Then on June 2nd, of course, we made an agreement with the government in May that you had to wear a face mask in the trains and in all the other public transport, and then the capacity could be increased from 25% to 50% per train or per vehicle, also for the metros and the buses, and that we would operate, would go back to the normal timetable. Actually, we first operated from the 2nd of June about 95% or so, almost all trains. And since last Monday, we operate the full timetable again. And of course, since yesterday, also this all seats can be used again. So the capacity is 100% of the trains and 100% of the seats, so which is full capacity. So hopefully now the passengers come back also. So I would like to end this part with a little bit of information. How did we do the first improvements? Actually, what we used is an internally developed algorithm which uses, which is basically a genetic algorithm, which is a meta-heuristic, called the lijnvoeringsmodel, so the line planning model, determine which lines had the most impact on the capacity and on travel time reduction. So we wanted first to introduce some trains which have a big impact on the capacity and also a big impact on the passengers. And actually that's not the normal way we use this model, but normally we optimize total travel time for all passengers or the profit of the company, but we changed it a little bit. We tuned it a little bit in a different way and in some sense abused it to see which trains were most attractive to add. And not surprisingly, the two most important trains were to introduce intercity trains between Amsterdam and Rotterdam over the Hague, so via Leiden the Hague, as one of our most crowded routes, and also between Rotterdam and Utrecht, such that basically because between Utrecht and Amsterdam there was always an intercity operating, you could make again the round trip in the Randstad among all the big four cities. So they were, of course, then in our first upgrade, together with some more, because we also got some complaints that also on the faraway parts of the country, people should be able to travel again. So we also introduced intercities. This intercity from Amsterdam to Rotterdam went further to Vlissingen. The train from Rotterdam to Utrecht over Zwolle to the north. And we also introduced intercities to the east and also on the route Roosendaal-Zwolle. So in this way, we basically took our decision based on algorithms and on data, what would be the first step to reintroduce. And then at the end, of course, now everything is back to normal. So I would like to give the floor to Menno for the second part of our talk, and he will look at the future.
Okay, my presentation will be about the impact of COVID-19 on train trips. It is for NS very important to have a good insight in the future number of train trips. And why is that? That is because we base a lot of our decisions on passenger demand forecasts. One of them is how much rolling stock we need as a company, where do we assign it to the network, but also for timetable development, we need to know how much future demand we will have, and also for all other kinds of decisions. It's like how much personnel do we need, which stations do we want to improve, for energy supply, for revenue forecasting. So for all those decisions, we need to have insight in future demand. Usually that's already quite a difficult task, but due to COVID-19, that task was even more difficult. We basically had a lot of uncertainties. And we basically had four main questions. And the first one is, well, pre-COVID, we had quite high demand. Demand figures were rising all the time. But due to COVID and the lockdown, we saw a steep decline of our demand. And the first basic question was, how deep will demand actually drop? And therefore we did, on a daily basis, we set up a monitoring system, and we saw that demand dropped as deep as 90%. So that's, we only had 10% of our pre-COVID demand remaining. Well, then the second big question is, how long will each phase last? How long will the lockdown last? How long will the transition period until we have a vaccine or proper treatment for COVID? How long will that last? And those questions were very important, but of course we cannot see into the future, so therefore we use different scenarios. And the third main question was, how fast will demand actually recover? Therefore we use the monitoring system that I talked about, and we also use different scenarios. And finally, and that's the $100 question, $1 million question, to what level will demand actually restore? And the two main factors there are, we are going to have an economic recession, and we do not know yet how deep that will be and how long it will last, and whether the economy will fully recover or whether we may be in a recession for many years. Therefore, we use scenarios of the Dutch Planning Agency, Centraal Planbureau. And also we want to know what changes in customer behavior will remain also in the future. To get more insight into that, we did a big customer research. And that is the thing I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. Okay, so we did a big research. We did it together with the Technical University of Delft, with the Public Transport Lab of the university. It is a longitudinal survey, which means that we are sending out surveys to the same respondents in several time periods. The first one was at the end of April, the second one at the end of June. That was last Friday we sent out a survey. And the third one will be in September, and we may even have a fourth one. In our first survey, we had quite a lot of respondents. We almost had 50,000. All of them are train travelers. We sent out about 100,000 surveys, and well, about 50% response. It's quite nice. Even though the survey was really extremely long, we found out that 96% of participants were willing to also participate in the second survey that we sent out last week. In the survey, we focused on activity patterns and travel behavior in 3 different periods. That's the period before COVID. So we asked respondents to describe their travel behavior during a typical week before COVID. We asked them to do the same in the last week. And also we asked them to give some kind of insight into what they think they will do after COVID. That's of course quite difficult for respondents to do. But well, that's what was the best way to get insight into future travel behavior. And because we are doing this survey several times, we can also see if those travel intentions change. Well, the big question is, does COVID-19 have impact on future travel behavior? And it wouldn't surprise you, yes, it does. Even though 2/3 of people say they will return to their normal travel behavior after COVID, when compared to pre-COVID, there's also about 20% that say, well, we are going to do something different. Doing something different comes with 4 big trends that we discovered from the research. That we also already expected to happen. And those are 3 threats to NS and 1 opportunity. In the next figures, you will see the threats in red and opportunities in green. Threat one is that actual trips, physical trips, may be substituted by digital activities. That can be working from home, but also students taking lessons from home, or doing social interactions from home. The second one is people still traveling, but not by train, but by another mode. The third one is people still traveling by train, but due to changed circumstances, they may find it less pleasant. And then there's also some good news that we may have a chance to flatten our curve to when people are avoiding peak travel. I'm going to talk about these 4 trends a little bit more into detail. I have to check the time. Okay, 7 minutes to go. We asked people if they can work from home at the moment. That was at the end of April, and we found out that 5 out of our 6 commuters actually could work from home. There was a small group that could not work from home pre-COVID, but since COVID started to work from home, has the possibilities. And there's also 1 out of 6 that actually cannot work from home. And most of them need to be physically attendant at their job. Those can be people like nurses or firemen or people working in the grocery store. We also asked our commuters whether they think they will be working more from home post-COVID when compared to pre-COVID. And about 50% of them think they will work more from home post-COVID. So those people will not be in the train or less in the train. I'm going to talk only about the big headlines of the research, not all the details. There's a lot more details, but I'm only highlighting the big headlines with you. So thread number 2 is people not traveling by train, but by another mode. We asked people if they have possibility for their train trips to be carried out with another mode of transport. We found out that about half of people say, yes, I can do that for part or even all of my trips. And the alternative mode that is mostly used by those people, or can mostly be used by those people, is car. That, of course, is no surprise to us. So now we know that a lot of people do have choice possibilities, and car is the most important one. We want to know if people say they will be traveling less by train post-COVID and maybe more by car. And what we see is indeed that 20% of people say they will be traveling less by train, and a small percentage of people say they will be traveling more by car when compared to traveling less by car. So there may be some substitution from train trips to car trips in the future. Threat number 3, that's people still traveling by train, but not finding it as pleasant as before. Before COVID, last year we had 89% of our customers being satisfied with their train trip. That was our overall high score. We were very pleased with that because it's also our main KPI, our main performance indicator measured by the government. But now we found out that a lot of people don't find traveling by train as pleasant anymore. We asked people, do you like traveling by train at the moment? And about half of customers said, no, I do not like traveling by train at the moment. Only 1/3 said they still like traveling by train. This was by the end of April. I assume now figures may be different. By then, people didn't have to wear a mask. And the main reasons why people didn't like traveling by train is that it was discouraged by the government. People were very much obeyed the government from our research. And also a lot of people said, I do not want to be close to other passengers. And also I do not want to touch any objects because of fear of getting ill. And there were also people that said, well, I am already ill, or my destination, I always go to the movies, but the movie theater is closed. And also people that said, well, the timetable is no good for me because I have to make a very long trip. And as Dennis pointed out, by the end of April, we did not have many intercity. Well, the opportunity we have is that people may avoid the peak. Usually our daily pattern of train trips looks a little bit like this, with a high morning peak and evening peak. And there are two developments. One is that if people work from home, the peaks are more than half of people are commuters. If people work more from home, peaks will be reduced. This is very good for us because if peaks are reduced, we may have a more cost-effective way of operating our company because all our assets are dimensioned on the peak. And even better is people still traveling by train, but at another time during the off-peak period. Well, the first one I just talked you through a few slides ago. And the second one, we asked people, do you think you will travel off-peak instead of peak? And indeed, there was quite a lot of people that said, yes, I will be traveling more off-peak than during peak times. So we may see a shift from peak to off-peak. Okay, so now we know all this. What do we do with it? We use these results in our demand forecasting to determine post-COVID demand. These forecasts are input, as we saw before, for rolling stock purchasement, timetable development, etc. And we repeat the research in June and September to get updates of our forecasting scenarios. So that's exactly 12:40, and because we are used to run on time, I will stop here.
Thank you so much, both Dennis and Menno, for the presentations. We have some questions in the question area. With one from Monique. I think this one was for Dennis, but maybe it's overlapping you both. Based on the choice to operate with certain train types, mainly sprinters, was there an impact on maintenance of the trains?
So now you can hear me, sorry. So there was definitely impact on the maintenance because of course the sprinter trains just needed their normal maintenance. While the intercity trains, they were parked, so of course then you still need to do some maintenance, but that's much less than normally. So also the maintenance staff had less work, but the people working on the sprinter trains still have to do their regular work. So we had to shift some staff there.
Yeah, makes sense. So then we have a question from Matt. So you brought back the pre-COVID-19 timetable on July 1st, but what about the demand? Is it feasible to have full capacity considering the very lower demand, considering the operation cost? And what is your plan to recover the demand in long and short term? So I think you covered this already a little bit, but maybe you can dive a little bit more into it.
Yeah, maybe Menno, you can do the second part of the question.
Yeah, I will.
You roughly did.
You do the first part first?
The first part first, yeah, that's fine. So of course the demand is not back yet. So at the moment we get, as also announced by the government, the whole public transport sector gets for 2020 a certain amount of tax money, which can be up to 1.5 billion euros, and most of it will go to NS. Basically for the missed revenue, such that we can operate our regular service. That's basically what we agreed with the government, and therefore it's also possible that passengers can come back now, and of course we hope they will do. But we also know that in the long term there will be less, as Menno told you, and maybe Menno, you can do then the second part, how we get them back.
Yeah, well, I'm not from the marketing department, so actually somebody from the marketing department can answer the question better, but I may give you some ideas. At first, when the lockdown started, we said, well, train trips are not for fun, and people stay at home, and then actually people also did stay at home. That was a little bit, the message was good at that time, but now we need to get people back. So now we changed our message to welcome back on the train, and we hope to welcome you back. And what we actually do, what we see right now is that especially leisure trips are already for quite a big part back on the trains. But especially students and commuters are still remaining at home. Well, students, we have reached an agreement with several universities and other education organizations to start. It's always difficult English. To start lessons again after summer break, and also to start to have students back at education organizations, but in a more spread way. So they will be more traveling off peak instead of peak, and we are also talking to big companies and also the government to see if there are possibilities to also start having commuters back on the trains.
Yeah, so building upon that, so you told us that you learned a lot about the corona situation and how to deal with this as far as you can. But did you also learn things that you could use post-corona?
Definitely, I think so. What we saw is that in such a crisis time, we could change rapidly the timetable, which normally takes a long time. So I think there are a lot of things that we could do also quicker in normal circumstances. On the other hand, we saw that it was even not quick enough, because what I didn't tell you, so that we needed to for every upgrade step, we needed 2 weeks. Before we can make an upgrade. But we saw that the government's decisions were always 1 week ahead. So we always needed to make some guess what they will do, what will be the next decision of the government. So we figured out that our internal processes should be even quicker than what we did now. So we come up with some more ideas, and if basically when we use more advanced methods, algorithms to reschedule, then we can do it quicker. So we should even invest more in that.
Do you want to add anything, Menno?
Yeah, well, same, more or less same goes for us. Usually we had quite a long process to make demand forecasting with a very complex model. We changed that to a more simple model, and that was a lot more flexible, so we can adapt a lot quicker. And we also found that our organization also adapted. So it was now a lot easier to, for instance, to get a slot on the agenda of the board of directors. usually you have to wait for a month or so, and now it was no problem to get it next week.
Cool to see that if you need to improve that, you actually can improve.
Yeah, I think another nice thing is that that what we learned or that we got is, for instance, the chip card data that you, so the smart cards that you use check in, check out. And we always got the numbers and the statistics a few days afterwards, or at least not on the same day. And since the crisis, we can get them on the same day. So we know now what happened this morning.
Next time is real time.
Yeah.
Next step. Cool. So there's another question, and I think it is a little bit related to this, as in how do you act on things? Should NS diversify more in their services to guarantee the future? Invest in workplaces like Regis or invest in secure video conference solutions? You may be observed with NS the same as with KLM. Are they too specialized?
That's a good question for our strategy department, I would say, but I think actually in Dutch we would say schoenmaker blijft blij je leest. For the non-Dutch speaking, they maybe can ask a colleague to translate this. So I think we are not very good in doing other things. We are mainly a public transport organization. Of course, we look not only at trains, but also at the OV-fiets and so the shared bikes, etc. But to do completely different things like having online conferences and facilitate that, I think the Googles and others are better in that than we.
Now, we have done that in the past. For instance, we've been in telecommunications, and we then decided to stick to our main goal. That's public transport, and also the station. Having retail and real estate at and around stations.
And also then building up the question for looking at the future, will you combine pre-COVID data and survey results for future prognosis? If so, how will you do this?
Pre-COVID data.
Yeah, so the data from all the, for example, the chipkaarten.
Yeah, we always use a lot of data in our future in our forecasts. We use pre-COVID data, but also COVID data, and also, for instance, the survey results that I just talked about. So we always combine a lot of data to get best forecasts.
But how will you work with the outlier of the COVID period for future prognosis?
Okay, is that the question? Yeah, the outlier of the COVID period, that's a very difficult one. We may, we will have to see. We are aware that 2020 will be a very odd year, and we may use 2019 as a base year for our forecasts for the next few years. Usually we update our base year every year. Now we may stick to 2019 for some years. We're still not sure.
No, I can imagine. Another interesting question, which is going back to the current situation. Avoiding peak travel is an opportunity for NS, but only to the extent that telecommuting days are evenly distributed over the work week. Do you have any insights on whether or not people work from home on 2 or 3 days? 3 days that are always the same?
Yeah, that's a good question. We at the moment we know that there is quite a big tendency to work from home at always at the same days of the week, especially Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are popular, and Tuesdays and Thursdays are not very popular. We hope this will change in the future, and if people indeed want to avoid peak traveling, then they should also work from home at Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we hope this will be the case.
Thank you. For Menno is this question specifically. What are your predictions now to get back to 100% demand? Is it weeks, months, or years? Shall we even expect to reach 100%?
Okay, so well, it's not weeks for sure, and also months will not be the case. It will be a matter of years. And we use different scenarios, and some scenarios indeed we do return to normal demand within a reasonable time period. But it may also take a very long time, and it may even never happen. But we hope to return to normal demand somewhere in the next few years.
Yeah, and you always never know.
No, that's true.
Mark, do you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask?
Yeah, I've also I have two questions still. One question is about suppose a second lockdown will appear. Would you think about the reservation system also? Because it was probably a bit short day to build a reservation system for train seats. You need probably electronic train numbering and electronic seat numbering, and that's only probably in the Thalys and some ICE trains available. But are you planning to invest in that, or do you think it's not worthwhile to do it?
Actually, we started some projects during this period on working on this, and if it will be a complete reservation system or more, let's say, a system where it's voluntary to register your trip. Actually, we were going to use that now since yesterday for bike reservation. So when people go by bike on holiday or just for a day out, they have to reserve a place for their bike. And maybe if it's successful, this could be used also in a second lockdown. I don't hope that it will happen. Also for passengers.
Yeah.
But what we basically saw is that the number of passengers, when there is a lockdown, it goes down so rapidly that it's questionable if it's needed.
I was thinking about that you would answer it in this way. If you order now new trains, will you ask for that functionality in the new trains? That you can do seat numbering and also car numbering?
Actually, I don't know, to be honest, but I'm also not sure if we do a new, if we will place a new order very soon. So I think we have some time to think about it. Of course, we before you really now take a decision to order a new one in stock, then you will think about this kind of things. But also, it's not sure when the next order will be.
Yeah, and Dennis, I've also a question more on the algorithmic question. What was the objective that you used in your timetabling model? That's the first part of the question. And the second part is, was it more difficult to find good timetables? Because, yeah, you have, of course, a much larger solution space if the scale is not so tight. Or is it the other way around, that it is much more easy to find?
Yeah, so basically we used an algorithm in this upgrade phase to determine which lines we would add. And normally we use that algorithm, basically we give it complete freedom. But here basically we limit the search space because we said you can only reintroduce lines that we had in the past. So you cannot do something completely different. So basically our train system, I think we have about 100 lines. So about half we were still operating at that phase, and basically we use the algorithm to decide which ones are the most attractive to add first. And then of course your search space is quite limited. And basically we try to reuse this objective basically to reduce travel time for passengers in total, so that basically you look first at the large number of passengers. But basically we didn't use the results directly because we also looked at what comes out and have some expert opinion and then make a combination of lines.
Yeah, and probably I've one last question. Is a way to stimulate that people come back in the train also revenue management, so pricing? And what do you think about pricing? Probably Menno could say a few words about that. Or yeah, I don't know whether you're in revenue management in NS, but probably you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I'm not in revenue management, but well, for long now we are thinking about. We already do a revenue management that needs to be set first. Though we can go a lot further than what we do right now. We are already thinking about that for quite some time and making different scenarios. And Dennis and I are both involved in those kind of exercises. And of course, it is a possibility, but we are limited in the freedom to change our prices due to our contract with the government. So it always has to be within the boundaries of that contract, and also we have to discuss that with all our stakeholders.
Yeah.
Also with customer organizations, etc., and the ministry.
I can imagine.
Maybe if I can have a small add-on, because Menno and I and some other colleagues, some are also in this webinar, we wrote an article about this. Actually, we wrote it before Corona, which is published in the most recent issue of Statoil. I haven't seen it yet, but I know that some people already got it at home. So,
I did.
You did. So if you're interested, you can read our article about this in Statoil, which is Statoil is the magazine of the Dutch OR and Statistics Society.
Yeah. Very interesting. I don't have more questions. Probably Jane and Julia, something came up. No, not really. More questions. Then I want to thank you, Menno and Dennis, very much. It was a very interesting presentation I found. And yeah, thank you for your time. And I also want to thank all the attendees for their time.